Martin Luther King Jr. said if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. What are your life examples of this? After my mom died, I set a single goal to do something productive each day. For a while, it was getting out of bed, then it was brushing my hair, then it was cooking something to eat. As each little thing graded from my thing for the day to just a habit, I would add a new thing. It took a while to be functional again. It really did feel like I was crawling when everyone else was running. This is going to sound stupid to most who haven't been through it, but my ex-husband of 17 years cheated on me with my best friend. It's all so cliche. We had 2 preteen boys that he didn't want anything to do with. Somehow I kicked him out of the house, didn't accept his fake apologies, and then watched my run turn into a walk, then a crawl. I dragged us through every day. It happened to be the last 2 weeks of school, and I still went to their end of the year award programs and smiled even though neighbors were whispering, and I hosted birthday parties minus a parent, and I taught one to drive. I am not completely sure how I was strong enough, but I brought us all forward in those dark days. I wasn't going to let this affect them, and now, even with their dad living 3 miles away with his new family and acting like they don't exist, I crawl, with them on my back. My wife died June 2015. I lost my job the same moment she passed because I was their in-home caretaker for 3 years because she was in a persistent vegetative state. I got addicted to methamphetamines again after 22 years of sobriety. My service dog of 10 years died. I survived an attempted murder from 2 people with rebar and wound up with brain damage and a broken neck. I got evicted because I couldn't afford any more to live in our townhome. I walked away from 30 years of memories because I had nowhere to store anything. I spent 2.5 years homeless, living on the streets and in shelters, and the majority of everything that happened to me happened in 6 months. I finally got on Social Security for psychoaffective disorder that I got from using drugs after my wife died, and I finally got back home again in September. The point is, I got through it all because I kept moving forward. Graduated high school in 01, tried the 4-year university thing, was really depressed and didn't go to class much because of it. After the first semester, dropped out and enlisted. 3 years later, I'm medically discharged, worked multiple shift jobs while attending CC, found a somewhat decent job while nearing the completion of my associates. Then the recession happened. Finished my associates while spending a year on unemployment. Unemployment runs out, and I decide to hold off on trying to transfer to finish my 4-year degree. Get a job at a gas station. A month later, promoted to assistant manager. 8 months later, I'm a store manager. Year later, leave for a contractor position at a bank doing ATM support. About a year later, I was hired on as an employee. 5.5 years later, I'm a new salaried role doing data analysis and finishing my degree. When I was 22, I lost my leg due to a suicide attempt and became an amputee as a result of my own stupid actions. Was extremely difficult, but I decided I was going to keep living and really see what I could do with the time and resources I have. I always thought I was too stupid and ugly to do anything with my life. Once there wasn't much left to lose, I got my shit together, stopped being a victim, and now I'm 25 going to school, clean and sober, no friends or girlfriend or family really, but I'm content being alone and with my thoughts. And I think my prosthetics look pretty badass. This is extremely minor, but I completed 5K. I'm not a runner. In fact, I hate running. I have short legs and small feet. I'm slow and overweight. I did train, albeit not much. I started the race by running until I was out of breath, half a mile in. Then it was intermittent walking and running until the end. I was the second to last person to finish, but I didn't care. It was one of the best highs I've ever had. It felt good to accomplish something I always told myself I would do someday, but never worked up the courage to try. I was proud of myself. I rode my bike across the US, most of it solo. In the middle of Missouri, I just had enough. I stopped on some guy's lawn and just cried. He came out and asked me what was up, and I explained to him how far I'd come, started in San Francisco, and that I was just done. He told me to ride into town, I think Springfield, which was only 10 miles away, and took a few days off and rest, which is what I did, because hey, one more day wouldn't matter, and the worst that would happen is that I'd pack it in and go home. Well, a day of rest seemed to be exactly what I needed. I spent a whole day, or most of it anyway, in blessed air conditioning, ate all the food, drank all the water, and was more or less ready to go again. I took a few more one-day breaks between Missouri and Williamsburg, VA, which really helped me out. So yeah, one step back, two steps forward. My entire life, I have an unnamed inflammation issue. I wake up every day at a 4 to 8/10 pain level. I've never not been in pain, been suicidal from it before, but fuck it. I get up, I go to work. Being gluten/dairy free helps a lot, but sheesh, some days I shower laying down. Lots of days, I don't even have the energy to play video games after work. Not sure if it's spite or what that keeps me going, but I'm still here, and I'm still going to live my life. Also, invisible disabilities suck. I don't know if this has been said before in this post, but there's a phrase that I constantly think of whenever I feel like I can't move forward. An arrow has to go back in order to move forward. Granted, I know this in Spanish and can't remember where I read it, but for whoever needs to read this, it's okay to step back and see where you're at in order to know what you want to aim at. Stay strong, fellow Redditors. I make up my own version of this while going through cancer. Semper progredi, or progredi semper. I always forgot what the order should be. Roughly translate from Latin to English as always moving forward. The idea is, no matter how tough things get, as long as you're making some sort of progress, you're moving in the right direction. When my heavy wheelchair broke down right before my final architect school assignment, I asked random strangers to take the freshly printed floor plans to the right classroom. Everyone was running to get their own stuff delivered in time, so I asked people to push me 10 meters or so. The third guy pushed me all the way through, and the plans got delivered in time. Thank you, kind strangers. I was deep in depression for most of a year. No job, no friends, heartbroken. I had a roof over my head thanks to my parents, but nothing else besides. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life and no resources to pursue it if I did. Something like finishing college, or traveling the world, or pursuing my artistic dreams, or having a loving relationship was completely beyond my grasp. But one day, I messaged an acquaintance, actually an ex-girlfriend of a guy I knew, and I asked if she wanted to hang out. Eventually, that became a relationship, we got married, I started publishing books, we lived in Europe for a while, etc. None of that was possible from the place I started in, but I dug myself out one small victory at a time. Life keeps changing. I'm divorced but in a much healthier and happier relationship, living far from where I'd ever been. I found another fulfilling career and lots of good friends, and I'll never fall into the place I was again, because I have memories of my own success. Once you can recall confidence, you can always use that as a first step to anything else. Drawing. After losing everything I ever drew in my life due to a crappy moving company, I was devastated and didn't draw for a few years. Eventually got a whiteboard and said, I'll just do a stupid little doodle once a week. Then it became once a day. They got more elaborate. Then 5 days ago, I picked up a sketchbook and pencil for the first time in years and said, just 10 minutes. A couple of days a week. I've ended up getting lost in it for a couple of hours already. And I can't describe the feeling of joy when I looked at the completed outline and thought, holy shit, it actually looks like the thing I'm drawing. I have barely begun shading, but I'm so excited to continue it tomorrow. When I left my abusive ex-husband, immediately before, he had maxed out my credit cards and had spent all of the savings earlier. He prevented me from finishing my bachelor studies and from working. I had 2 toddlers and friends who were kind enough to share time watching the babies so I could work enough to get by. He stalked me and harassed me with threats daily. I also broke a tooth in half, stress grinding, and was hospitalized for a week for what should have been a minor illness. There were at least 5 times I could have easily died that year. I did some work from home and paid off enough of my credit line to charge tuition to it. I honestly thought it would kill me, but I finished a degree and kept my babies alive while well under the poverty line, with only some help from friends. Just enough childcare to cover, sometimes not enough, and I'd have to call in. It felt impossible. The only thing that got me through was telling myself that I could because I was already doing it, so I could keep on doing it, and the belief that eventually it would be better. We got through. I got a degree and a decent job. The kids are well. I bought a house. We've come so far in just a few years. It's amazing, really. The one time I went to an SA support group at the hospital following my overdose, which was a reaction to being raped, the therapist told me this exact quote. I was 18 and not one part of me wanted to be alive, and those few weeks were the hardest of my life, but those words stuck with me. I didn't really get out of bed much once home, but after a few days, I kept thinking about this and remembering quite literally rolling out of bed and basically crawling to the bathroom to shower for the first time in a while. A very literal example, but I think of this quote when times are rough. Sometimes you really just have to endure and crawl until you can continue on your path walking. Getting sober. There were days when all I could do was just take each minute at a time. Crawling, but with time. The minutes turned to an hour, then a day, then a couple of days, so on and so forth, until I was running. I began opioid addiction treatment 2 days before my birthday. It was my hardest fought battle, but also the greatest gift I ever gave myself. I'll be 5 years clean in 3 months. Over the last 2 years, I've lost both grandpas, a childhood friend, an old family friend, and a daughter. Her twin was stuck in the NICU for 4 months that started at the beginning of COVID. Only my wife was allowed to see my daughter, and I was stuck at home with a 9-year-old and a 1-year-old, both on the spectrum. I became so stressed and depressed, I put on that COVID weight and pretty much became a sloth. I never had the motivation to get up and do anything. I quit my job, dropped out of school, wasn't sleeping, and the cycle of depression continued. Then I got a counselor and just wanted to talk about the stress of the NICU and the pre-Emmy baby. That evolved into seeing a doctor about my weight and potential health issues. Turns out my circadian rhythm is off. My upper jaw is preventing me proper airflow, and I was showing early signs of Hashimoto's. From there, I started a new job where I walked a lot. I didn't lose much weight, but I started to feel better about myself being active. Then I started exercising 20 to 30 minutes a day. Now I walk about 8 to 10 miles at work, exercise for 45 minutes a day, eat healthy, and generally feel great about life. It's not much, but I was at my lowest point this year, and the only thing stopping me from killing myself was my wife and kids. Now I'm working a great job I enjoy, lost 16 pounds since Thanksgiving, and my early signs of Hashimoto's has reduced significantly. I'm really proud of myself. When I was 16, I had just gotten out of an abusive relationship where I was sexually assaulted. Shortly afterwards, I met someone who actually treated me decently, but I miscarried our child. Then my parents started doing meth, and my mom lost her job. Shortly after, I was robbed and became homeless. Corona happened, 2 of my friends attempted suicide, 1 died and the other didn't because I made it there in time. Through it all, I managed to make it to school most days, and graduated with college credit. I still don't know what I want to do, but I have hope because I work so hard. I also worked as a busser all throughout my junior and part of my senior year to save money. My mom eventually sobered up, and the day I graduated, we signed a lease on a house. It's still hard. Since I was robbed, I still don't have much, but it's enough. I'm proud of how far I've come. Finances. I made a few bad decisions when I was single. Nothing all that crazy. Still had a stellar credit rating. I was okay by myself. Then I married a woman with a pretty bad track record. Credit in the gutter. Together we had a little mountain of debt. Still trying to figure out this whole marriage thing. Me figuring out this whole having kids thing. I had no kids. She has 3. I didn't really realize how much having them under me would cost me even with her working. But anywho, I got serious about resolving the issue. Life keeps happening. Kids need this or that. But through some good budgeting, investing in myself, working hard at my job, sticking to my guns, not giving up, we have slowly gone from crawl stage to walking stage. By the beginning of next year, I think we can get to the jogging stage. I was diagnosed with a pretty crippling bout of peripheral neuropathy, onset as of 2 years ago. Coincidentally, at that time, I had also moved 1,000 miles away from home to a city with lots of stairs and walking. Started a new job at Dojang as an assistant instructor and was beginning graduate school. While this diagnosis looks different for everyone, for me, it looked and still looks, honestly, like my nerves overworking constantly with no break, causing my muscles to jump/spasm until they lock up with lactic acid buildup and God knows what else, resulting in painful leg and later full body cramps. I spent more than a fair share of nights sitting on a subway steps until my body finally released shakily. A few times I did in fact crawl or drag my way down my hall from the elevator to my apartment. Thank everything I was actually living with my amazing roommate, my twin sibling. Now 2.5 years later, I am graduated with a job in my field, and although I have as little of an idea as I did back then about the cause of my medical stuff, I do know that I graduated with almost a 4.0 in my national accredited program. I'm on track to being a licensed practitioner, and my medicine helps me as much as it can, so I'm making progress still, one knee at a time down here. My wife fell into postpartum depression after having her first child. We had just moved to a new city, and I had just started a new job that was very stressful and time-consuming. And I didn't notice the signs soon enough before she fell into a deep depression. I was failing at my job at the time because I was put into a very difficult position and given very limited parameters. I was failing at home, and I felt some days couldn't end soon enough. I was able to find a therapist and convince my wife to do the same. We've been connected with other families with kids similar in age, and I truly feel that's what saved us. Most days I didn't want to get out of bed, and neither did my wife, and all of our focus went into our son and my job. We grew a bit distant emotionally, but I persisted to initiate checking in with her. She found it annoying most days, so I had to switch up how I approached difficult topics. But I was still learning, and most of the time we ended up fighting. But I couldn't stop. I had to keep finding new ways to adapt. I myself struggle with depressive episodes, and therapy along with self-check-ins has helped me better understand why my wife and I swing through ups and downs. Fast forward a few years later, and we are doing a lot better with fewer confrontations and have a beautiful newborn daughter. Our communication has improved dramatically. We can joke with each other again and be goofy. Those first 5 years of being a new father in a new city with a new job were the hardest I've ever endured. I can't imagine what my world would be like now had I given up. Never give up. 1% better every day. 2 years ago, I was seriously depressed and suicidal. I could tell you what day was the worst in my life. My life had been pretty awful for a long time. My crawling was admitting everything to my brother. Next, I went into therapy. Then I got a job. Through that job, I got more friends than ever. I started dating someone I had gamed with online for over a year. This was all over the course of a year. This past November, I moved countries to live with him. And I couldn't ask for better. I will always have depression, it's genetic, and my past won't let me go. But at least I know that even if I just move a little each day, I can slowly make big changes happen. Leaving an abusive marriage very carefully to try and keep things as calm as possible. Trying to take care of my very messed up head from all the rewriting and manipulation, slipping back into wanting to make sure he wasn't too unhappy or angry, pulling myself out of those worries. Every day was a slow crawl forward, until I got him to sign the divorce papers. Then I slowly walked into really recovering. For me, it's been my battle with CPTSD over the past few years. I don't have access to a trauma counselor, so I've been figuring out things on my own. I've nearly given up a few times, even went so as far to passively start planning suicide at one point. And I'm pretty sure I'll be stuck in the crawling phase for a while yet. But I'm still here, and I'm still moving forward. I got leukemia right after high school, and was in the hospital on and off for most of the next year. Almost died a few times to stuff like septic shock. By the time I hit the end of the intensive treatment and got into the maintenance phase, keeping the cancer away once it's gone, I weighed 102 pounds and couldn't walk on my own. Before cancer, I was 150 pounds of very little fat, who spent about 8 hours a week in the weight room. Now I have nerve and muscle damage in my legs and feet, scar tissue from 24 spinal taps in my back, and a couple of lung problems. But I'm back up to a skinny fat 126 and trying to get the gains again. Finding my future wife. I keep meeting people who are pretty amazing people, but turn out totally not right for me, or they aren't interested, or a multitude of factors where I just don't click with them. I can't find that intimate relationship I'm dying to have. I'm a hopeless romantic. I found one woman that I'm head over heels for, and she is in no place to be in a relationship. It's torn my heart out. So I just keep moving forward, meeting people, hoping that one day I'll be able to strike up a conversation with someone who won't want to ever leave. I can't rock, but I roll. Been a wheelchair user since I lost my legs at 8. By the time my mom was already dead, my father would be soon, and my grandma 12 years later. At 20, I had lost the 3 most important people in my life. I spent 2 years depressed after my grandma passed, but I had to keep going, and every time I felt like shit, I always say to myself, my mom did not have her life for this. Mine is a bit more literal. I used to be a guide runner for a blind friend of mine. He was a lot faster than me and pushed me to my limits several times on training runs. When he competed in marathons, he would use elite athletes who could run comfortably at his race pace whenever they were available. This particular year, he couldn't organize one of his regular race guides and asked me if I'd run the first half, 13.1 miles or 21.1 kilometers. Then pass him off to another runner for the second half. I knew I would burn out before the end, but I figured I could cruise the second half since I wasn't racing that day. Day of the marathon comes, and I wake up with the flu. I couldn't drop out as my mate needed me to guide, and I figured I'd probably DNF, did not finish at the halfway point. First half goes okay, and I pass my mate off to his other guide runner and settle in for the grind, because I wanted to finish now having run halfway already. Anyone who's ever run a marathon will tell you the last 6 miles / 10 kilometers is the hardest. For me, that day, it was murder on 2 feet. My pace went from flying at the start, to running in the middle, to walking at 20 miles, to crawling pace at the end. My blind mate missed his personal best by 30 seconds in the end, and that was an hour slower than mine. Got run over. Legs were shattered. No insurance. The other party paid $100K. My medical bills were $3.5 million. I had to learn to walk on my own. First with the walker, then with crutches, then with the cane. I was able to enjoy many years of being on my feet. Even with the pain, it caused me to be upright. I imagine myself at the base of a mountain when I'm first faced with the challenge. It's an imaginary mountain, so high I can't see the top. I'm going to though. I look at the ground before me, and I take a step. Every time I struggle, like I can't go on anymore, I return to that mountain. I'm resting on a ledge and looking down. I see the base of the mountain where I started. It was so much harder back then. It was going so much slower, and hey, it's so far back to the base of the mountain that it feels like more work to go back than it does to keep going. I grit my teeth and stand up to climb more. Odd thing is, when I reach the peak, I never looked at it because I don't need that mountain anymore. I'd never seen the peak of my imaginary mountain, but I've felt it in my life over and over and over. During COVID, I had my first true mental breakdown in April. It was incredibly difficult to function every day, terrified of everything. With therapy and medication, life started to at least become bearable. To help with my mental health, I decided to focus on a few things. I've learned to cook, took up woodworking, redone my basement, and have lost 70 pounds to be a normal BMI, with starting hill sprint training today. So I was figuratively crawling just to get out of bed in April, and was literally running today. Mold poisoning. Took me a year in the gym to regain a full satisfying inhale. Felt like I was drowning on dry land, and nobody could tell me what was wrong. I was definitely crawling by the time I knew what I had to do. It felt like an eternity in hell, but I'm flying now. After being in a very controlling marriage for 10 years, I left him. I had 3 kids, no job, thank God I had an education. I fought tooth and nail for it though, and in a state with no support because I followed him for his career. In the first 3 months, I got my first ever shitty apartment of my own, got my very first full-time job, making a whopping $30K a year, and started to figure out how to be an adult on my own. I had met my ex when I was 16 and he was 21, so I had never adopted by myself until that point. It's been 2.5 years since I left him. I own my 3-bedroom townhouse, and am now the executive assistant of the company I started at 2 years ago, increasing my pay by $20K a year. I believed for way too long that I couldn't do it without him, and that I should be thankful for the life he provided me, and the kids because we lived a comfortable life. Fuck that shit. I'm a boss bitch and am so much happier now. It was absolutely a crawl out of there, and it took me a long time to be even able to stand up on my own 2 feet. But I got there, and the struggle was worth every single fucking tear. When I was 15, I was made homeless because of reasons out of my control. That was the start of my GCSE year, and I was rapidly falling into a depression that I was struggling with. Somehow, I made it through my exams and got into one of the best sixth form colleges in my area. I then stumbled with my mental health again and was struggling every day just to wake up, let alone get out of bed, shower, and go to school. That was probably the worst year of my life, but somehow I picked myself up again. I quit school, I got myself an apprenticeship, working for an NHS, and sorted my life out. Things were still really difficult, but I knew I had to push through it. Now I am nearly 20, my partner and I are 5 years strong. I am still working full-time for the NHS. We have our own place, and are moving this year to a better place. And I am about to become an RAFAC uniform staff member with the Air Cadets. Life isn't perfect, but it sure is amazing to be here. Long story short, it was 2011. I had struggled for 4 years after graduating with student debt in 2007, largely unsuccessful in starting my career and life, and was massively depressed and frustrated at the unrelenting rejection. Some very good friends offered to fly me to New Mexico to stay with them and let me their car. So I spent my days of that week in New Mexico just driving around all day, taking excursions to the White Sands Desert, the Valley of Fires, Ruidoso, Sierra Blanca, etc. I was in awe of the absolute massive landscape. While I was driving, I would see a huge mountain or desert stretched out in front of me and think, that is incredibly enormous and awesome. But after a while of driving, not even all that long, 10 minutes, it would be behind me, and a whole new landscape would reveal itself. I had that watershed moment of clarity. Just keep moving. Even things that seem incredibly huge will eventually be behind you if you just keep going. I was suicidal and self-harming a lot when I was 13. Being involved in an abusive relationship while grieving the accidental death of my next-door neighbor, a longtime friend of mine, really made me feel like there was no reason to keep going. I attempted suicide once, but couldn't end up doing it. I am forever thankful for the love and support of my family. The reason I kept going was for them. That was the only thing that really mattered to me at that point. It's been 7 years, and I'm glad to say I have never been at such a low point again. I haven't self-harmed in 6 years, which feels pretty good. Depression. Heard a retired NHL player talk about how he felt lost after his career was over and had nothing to do, being that they were financially secure. Then one day his wife said, "I don't care what you do, but go out and do something." That's how it starts. And the next thing you know, you're back to being busy. At least it helps. I, male 11, have an autistic and deaf brother, male 12. My brother would scream and cry and toss around, which if you have been to a church before, is basically like yelling while the teachers are talking. Just pure anarchy. I was unfortunately next to my brother, and even though there was screaming and crying, I stayed still. I didn't shush him. I didn't signal him to stop. I didn't even move, even when he was an inch away from my ear. Almost everyone in the church, including the priest, were kind of weirded out by my brother, but I didn't care. I just hoped that one day, at least one person could understand my hardships. That day, I cried in church. No one noticed, but I felt happy. Happy that I was born this way. Happy that if I wasn't born this way, I would literally cry every night if I wasn't born this way. But I was, and am born like this, so I could deal with stuff like this. At the end, when we went outside of the church, I heard someone swear at my brother. Well, I think my comment is a little long, and my hand hurts, so I'll end it here. I was diagnosed with ankylosing spondylitis at 24. I had just freshly graduated college, and it hit me like a truck in 3 months. I couldn't even stand up correctly or use my left arm. I couldn't walk for more than a minute. I was in constant pain, but I always tried to do a little exercise. It hurt like hell, and when I started treatment and started to get better, I made more and more exercise. 2 years later, I can use gymnastic rings, and I'm very proud of that. For me, my personal version of this is that despite it being difficult and causing me to receive criticism, I persevere in the faces of adversity by responding to every feel-good Martin Luther King quote, with the reminder that his legacy has been disgustingly whitewashed, and that his final and greatest ambition was to unify the working class in a mass uprising against the system of capitalism, which he recognized as the single greatest evil force of oppression on earth. He began setting his sights on this goal in the form of his Poor People's Campaign, and this was the final straw that made him too dangerous to the system, so he was shortly murdered thereafter. And ever since they got rid of him, they made sure to fill our school's curriculum and our entertainment media with the version of him that was passive, non-aggressive, sugar-coated, and friendly to the white capitalistic hegemony. They especially loved to take little snippet quotes like this one and put them up on motivational posters, often with a nice, somber-looking portrait of him in black and white, so that we all spend time talking about how he said, "Move forward," rather than talking about how he said that capitalism is a catastrophic scourge upon this planet, and that it needs to be destroyed by working solidarity en masse. So yeah, basically what I'm saying is I just live, laugh, love, and dance like no one's watching, or whatever. I'm in university at the age of 32, and still in first year because I failed my mathematics courses I need for my accounting degree, but that doesn't stop me. I've been thinking about quitting, but I have the opportunity of staying at university.